All right, and we are live. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining me for our April Movie Club. Um, I'm really excited to talk about this one with you guys, but before we start, I'm going to go through my standard housekeeping spiel that changes drastically every time, despite the fact that I've been saying at the start of every single one of these calls for the past 2 years. So, let's see how I mess it up tonight. This is our movie club, which is a monthly club that we have at Dragonfly Arts. We are a Facebook group, and I have provided our Facebook link up on the screen here so that you can go check us out there. We have this movie club monthly. We also have an album listening club monthly. We actually already had our discussion last week for Marvin Gaye's album What's Going On, but it is up on YouTube, so you can still check it out. You can still comment on it. I will still see some comments. I actually haven't checked it out recently, so if you've left comments in the past week, I apologize. I will get to them. But I do actually get notifications about those, so I am always down to talk about any of these things that we've talked about, including any of our past picks, which can all be found on the Facebook group. Um, we also have a quarterly book club that is actually meeting this month. So we will be having that discussion in a couple of days here on the 30th. And then I announce our new picks the day after that. But it's not just these clubs that we have in our Facebook group. It's just a community of artists who get together and talk about some of the issues that they are dealing with, maybe look for feedback on things, just talk about all things arts and creatives. We also have a Saturday call that is all about that and is kind of we pick a topic and we discuss it, or we go completely off topic. Either way, it's fun. We have a bunch of other stuff that's going on, so definitely check us out on that Facebook group. And if you like us and you like what we do and you'd like to support us a little bit, we have a Patreon. Everything that we do and offer is free for our members, so you just need to join us in the Facebook group or sign up for the mailing list to get the information on that. But we appreciate any help that you're willing to give us, and you can support us for as little as $2 a month. And on that note, we're going to be discussing Ron. That was my little intro there. Thank you. This is a 1985 movie. It was directed, co-written, and edited, which I think is weird, by Akira Kurosawa. And it's kind of a mix of a parable from Japanese history but mostly King Lear. So had you guys seen this movie before?
Never heard of it.
Yeah. Tim's never heard of it. Tim didn't even watch it this time.
Kura who?
I know Tim's opinion on it, but did you guys like it? It's a long one. It's 2.5 hours long. I think slightly more than 2.5 hours.
It is long.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I've watched it. I first saw it in college, I believe, and it's been many years since I've seen it. So I do think like the beginning is quite slow, but once it hits the midpoint at the big castle attack, it becomes kind of extraordinary. So yeah, I really like it overall.
It's been on my to watch list for a while, and I just never picked it up because it is 2.5 hours long. So if I do have time to watch a movie, usually I'm like, not this. So I'm glad to have an excuse to sit down and watch something along these lines because, yeah, if left to my own devices, I'm not picking 2 hours, 40 minutes for myself.
If you have the opportunity ever to, I've seen it on the big screen 4 times, once every decade. Last time for the 2014 restoration at the New Art Theater, and it's a totally different film on the big screen. You really. I was watching it on my, what have I got? Like a 56-inch screen, and it really. I already love the film, so I can do that. But if you it just loses a little something, not being on a great big screen.
Well, so many of the shots are like very wide. So, I mean, he shot all of these wide and then with two other cameras that were at different focal lengths. So all of these scenes were shot with three different cameras. Um, but all of them were shot in this massive wide that he continually goes back to in his edits. So I could absolutely see this being absolutely incredible on a huge screen. The vastness of it doesn't quite play when it's a smaller
It is.
screen. Mine's like 70 inches and it's still too small.
Yeah, it's magnificent. If nothing else, it's magnificently photographed.
Let's see if I have.
Oh, this is a great moment. This is such an incredible moment.
I keep thinking about just him sitting inside the castle, like with the arrows flying behind him and just fire is probably one of the coolest shots.
Yeah,
I kind of wish that we stuck on it for a while because you kind of switch in and out, like you keep revisiting it. And I kind of wish there was just like a really long shot of just him coming to terms with what's happening because that's kind of what's happening there. Anyways, phenomenal scene. Huge fan.
did you guys see the trailer that I posted? That I made a trailer back in 2021 for this film because I was always disappointed by the trailers that were out there, and that's the third to last shot in that trailer that I made.
Yeah. That's my one big note is I just wanted that to be like a really long shot of just him sitting there coming to terms with what's going on, and I feel like I didn't get that. So that's my critique.
Yeah, come to think of it, it might be pretty cool if he was sitting there for a long time and then in a single shot, if he walked out and saw the destruction and this army standing there. But yeah, I'm not gonna say I'm better than Kurosawa by any means, but that would be kind of cool, I think. I don't know, maybe not.
Sorry, I'm trying to go through things because I just find it interesting that he edited it. That's not something that I'm used to seeing for directors. Like you know, you always have like the director's cut later on, but not for the standard thing.
Yeah, that was like at the beginning of his career, it was even more unusual back then because I think Seven Samurai is my favorite movie of his, and I once watched a behind the scenes featurette about it, and there was it was apparently pretty unusual for the director to also edit the movie at that time, and he was extremely quick at editing. Like he would get the dailies and then edit at night and then be ready to show them or something. I don't know if he did that on Ron, but yeah, he's always been an editor and a director.
Interesting note that I found for Ron was that his wife actually died while they were shooting this, and he took one day off and then came back. So he was very, very serious about his work. His wife of like 68 years. Like,
That's a little insane.
I think some of it was because he had a really bad decade in the 70s. I think he had this compulsion to keep working because just so that he could get it done. I mean, the previous film, Kagemusha, he ran out of money, and George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola made an arrangement to get the money to finish that film. So, you know, some of the fire was off his ass because Kagemusha was very successful. But you know, before then, he had like a 5-year dry spell.
so this was at the time of its release the most expensive film that Japanese cinema had ever come up with.
And every dollar is on the screen.
Yeah, absolutely. I was also going to say he actually attempted suicide in the 70s. Like things got so bad that he tried to cut his wrists. But yeah, I have heard that like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and Francis Ford Coppola were sort of instrumental in getting him out of the slump on Kagamusha and like propping up his spirits and that kind of thing.
I do know that, and I noticed this because I'm used to seeing like in front of Japanese films, like everything is in like Romanji as well as like Japanese. But this one was French. But that was because it took him, like, he started conceiving the idea for Ron in the mid 70s, and it took him that long to build the backing to make it happen the way he wanted to make it happen. But all of his movies around this time had to be joint ventures between countries because he just wasn't finding funding, and I don't think Japanese cinema had the pull, so he was just pulling from anywhere. So this is actually a French production.
When was this made sequentially? As because the only other bad film student, but the only other Kurosawa film I'm familiar with is Seven Samurai. When were these two made, like timeline wise?
About 30 years apart, because Seven Samurai was like in 1957 or somewhere around there, and Ron was released in 1985. So, yeah.
Ron is pretty close to the end of his career. He made like movies every year or two until about 1965, and then he only released like 5 after that. With
Seven
his
Samurai was
last
19
one being in 1993, so like huge time frames between them.
Seven Samurai was 1954.
Seven Samurai is also the only other movie of his that I've seen. However, I also have Ikaru on my to watch list. So I have a few of his other movies. Oh, no, wait. I've also seen High and Low. Never mind. I've seen 3 of his movies. Thank you very much.
Ikaru is interesting because it's almost like if Kurosawa and Ozu decided to make a film together, Ikaru is what you would get, which is a very
I love Ozu's like filmmaking and his cinematography, so it's right up my alley in that regard. But I do really like High and Low, and I also really like Seven Samurai, but I really like High and Low. So
I would highly recommend his other Shakespeare adaptation, which is Throne of Blood, which is his adaptation of Macbeth starring Toshiro Mifune. It's just so much fun. And Sergio Leone reshot it with Clint Eastwood, and it's almost as good as that was Once Upon a Time in the West. No, not Once Upon a Time in the West. Once Upon a Time in...
Well, Sergio remade Yojimbo to be A Fistful of Dollars.
Right,
but,
thank you.
Yeah, I love Throne of Blood. I would say, I mean, Macbeth is probably my favorite Shakespeare play, and so I kind of like Throne of Blood more than Ron. But I mean, you can't really go wrong with Kurosawa. And just on the subject of him, of his movies being remade, I would say he is possibly the most influential filmmaker ever when you consider how his movies have influenced everything. Because, like we just said, Yojimbo was remade into A Fistful of Dollars, and The Hidden Fortress was kind of remade into Star Wars, and then Star Wars influenced everything. And Seven Samurai also influenced tons of Westerns, especially The Magnificent Seven, which is a remake of it. So, like, and and also before all that, he made a detective movie called Straw Dog, or not Straw Dog, Stray Dog, which is like a buddy cop movie before that was even a genre. So, yeah, if you look at the ripple effect of his movies, it just, film history would almost kind of not exist without his movies, like, at least in the way that we know it. Um,
I think he spoke of his influence in an interview in the 60s, and he was talking about how, or maybe it was the 70s, and he was talking about people saying that he influenced American Westerns and American filmmakers in general. And he said, well, I was just making John Ford, I was just, using John Ford and Howard Hawks films to make mine. So it's, that bounce back thing, kind of like rock and roll, where the Beatles took old R&B and, brought it back to the United States.
Sorry, like I said, I'm trying to get Tim to take the reins on this.
Don't do that. Beckett, did you like the film?
I mean, I appreciate the the filmmaking of I enjoyed parts of it. Yeah, it's too long. It for me was a little dragging at points.
So they did a thing with Seven Samurai actually, where they thought that the movie was too long and that American audiences wouldn't want it, and so they shortened it down. So there's an Americanized version of it that's the same movie, just edited shorter. And they never did that for Ron, but it's about the same length of time as that. I took an intermission in the middle of it because I had to go pick something up, so I had a 20-minute intermission on my watching of it. But I mean, still, it still flew by because, yeah, like Derek said at the start, it kind of hits a point and then it's just go, 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 go.
I mean, to an extent, because I split it up as well, because I had things that I had to get done. So I watched it in 2 sittings. And I think where I paused in between was kind of right after the castle siege. And that scene is amazing. Like, I loved it. That was like definitely the highlight of the film for me. But like it, after he leaves and there's all the political intrigue and things, there are some moments that are very engaging in all of that. But a lot of it is just like, what's his name? The Lord, the Father.
Hidatora.
Was it?
Hidatora.
Hidatora, yeah. A lot of it is just him like in his madness, which I understand is King Lear. Like I studied Shakespeare in college, but I was like, it's just kind of dragging on a bit for me.
I think one of my favorite things about this movie is that when he started coming up with the idea for it in the 1970s, he had never heard of King Lear. So I have to imagine what happened, because what this was actually based on was Daimyo Mori Motonari. And that's what the thing at the beginning was, the parable of the 3 arrows, harder to break together. That comes from that. But I guess in the parable, the sons are really, really nice and good and loyal. And he was like, what if they were mean? And I imagine he started writing the script and somebody was like, this is King Lear. But I looked it up because I was like, it is an interesting difference of King Lear is all daughters. And so like a lot of the betrayal that happens on the side is like men veering for power that's not really theirs. But this is all men to begin with. And I was like, is that a Japanese thing? And I was like, I don't think it is. I think just along the way, somebody was like, this sounds like King Lear. And he was like, you're right. Let's go with that. Is kind of the vibe that I got.
Interesting. I knew there were more female characters in King Lear. It's been a long time since I've read that play. I forgot that part.
It's 3 daughters instead of 3 sons. So, but there is a correlation. I mean, that's why we have a fool. So this was the King Lear analog for each of the characters.
I did enjoy. I always am curious with these old, and you know, the production of this film. There were a lot more like mid 80s movies that felt a little bit more modern in just the way some of the like production was handled. Like The Fake Blood is what I'm getting at. I always am very interested in these like older movies. Like, what was it? Paint? Like, what did they use for The Fake Blood? Because it's so vibrant.
I assumed it was paint. I mean, this entire movie is very vibrant. I
Yeah.
don't know a lot about old Japanese armor, but this Japanese armor was super colorful.
Was
Like
it shot in
everybody,
color?
I would think so. I don't actually know, but I would think so just based on the way that a lot of the colors look. Um,
Yeah.
I feel like that would have been mentioned somewhere in my
Mm.
What this?
thing,
You know,
but
this film was shot in color. Yeah.
yeah, it was definitely had to have been shot
Oh,
in
yeah.
color.
I
But
do love a lot of the like Tim mentioned earlier, the photography and the composition and you know, the colors and yeah, it's a very beautiful looking film.
I have some of these somewhere. I have digital copies. He had this. He painted the storyboards himself, and he already had before I think he even got financing. He already had every shot in the film storyboarded, and the paintings are so fascinating to look at. They're really beautiful.
yeah, it definitely strikes me as a movie in which he knew exactly what he was looking for. Although I guess there is a scene that was cut from it that you can only find in a documentary where he painted an entire field gold. And I'm really upset I didn't check out the documentary before this because I want to see it.
There's another great doc. There's an interview, or not a doc, but an interview, a video interview with Sidney Lumet, where he has some fascinating insights about the film. He refers to Kurosawa as Beethoven, as a late era Beethoven, and that Ron is akin. And you'd have to go to watch the interview because I won't spoil it for you. But he says Ron is akin to Beethoven's late quartets and the Seventh Symphony. And he also
Yeah, I
talks
would.
about vision.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't seen that with Sidney Lumet, but with regards to the Beethoven connection, supposedly Akira Kurosawa's eyesight was failing at this point. So he, yeah, he had to like. I'm actually not sure like how he was able to direct something so visually striking, but it's just similar to um, how Beethoven's hearing was failing
Oh,
near the end
interesting.
of his career.
It might be why it's so colorful, to be completely honest. A lot of artists that are losing their eyesight tend to go for really, really bright colors because they're easier to see. So that's I am looking at these storyboards and they are absolutely gorgeous and
Yeah.
really, really incredible, honestly.
I noticed that this won best costume design
It did.
and
It's the
I
only Oscar it won. It was nominated for like director and production design and something else.
the costumes are incredible.
Took 2 years and they handmade all of those armor.
That's crazy. Wow. I mean, I
Yeah,
guess that's how it would have been done back in the 1600s.
Mhm. I read that there were 1,400 extras, so all of those people needed to be in armor somehow.
Jeez.
And 200 horses.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to think about like everything that you see on screen is practical. There's no, I mean, even a lot of the landscapes and things like there's no digital altering of anything.
Yeah. On that note, supposedly the castle was full sized, so they actually built the castle and then burned it down,
Yeah.
and they had 8 cameras shooting it from every angle because you don't get a second chance at that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's extraordinary, like the scale of it, and yeah, just burning down a whole castle is really something extraordinary. I think.
Building a whole castle just so you can burn it down is ridiculous. They also custom built the ruins of the castle that Lady Sue's brother, whose name eludes me and I didn't have it written down right in front of me.
Surumaru.
Yeah. However, the other two are actual Japanese castles that they got permits to film in. So it's Kumamoto and Himeji, which I actually went to Himeji. And it is difficult to get around that place. So that is even more impressive for filming. I think that people in old time Japan were just extremely short.
That's probably true.
Because I'm not a tall person and I had a really rough time getting around those stairs.
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at, I don't think I ever noticed this before. I was looking at the scenes with Jiro where he does not have his helmet on. And he looks like that cartoon character, what is it, Martian alien guy with the big head.
It was so distracting for me.
Marvin the Martian?
Yeah, Marvin the Martian.
No, not Marvin. No.
No. It's a Megamind kind of deal.
Yeah. When he's sitting there on the floor with his two people in front of him, and it's just the way he's shot from above makes that head look even bigger than it actually is. And I never miss that when I see it. It's just so jarring for me. It just kind of makes me step back for a moment.
I feel like it's pronounced by the baldness too. Like it just makes it look more.
Yeah, the style is very funny.
Yeah, I was thinking about because we've talked a lot about the long shots, or the medium to long lenses, because he never uses, and Lumet even points out how important that is that you never see a close-up in this film. You look at Seven Samurai, lots of close-ups. In this film, there are none, which he uses to keep you emotionally distant from these characters. But it also feels like the movie is part stage, theatrical production, and then with intercuts of an action movie. It's kind of like, and the theatrical part is so overtly theatrical in the way that Nakadai, and I forget the name of the woman who plays Kaede, the way they use movement, the way they use the influence of No to communicate, and Nakadai especially, the whole performance is just all these violent movements and facial, explosions, and and none of the other actors do that. It's just those two characters.
It's kind of weird and like almost a little comedic because everybody else looks like normal people, and then you have these two stage performers that are acting like stage performers.
A lot of the film feels like a stage performance, especially with the wideness of the shots.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually initially thought that that's what he was going for with it, but it's not. A lot of his intentions for this were things I had to think about after the fact when I put all the pieces together rather than like my initial reaction to it. But he takes a lot of influence from No. So like a lot of his movies have that kind of influence. It's just kind of weird to see a movie in which only two characters out of a whole cast of characters.
I mean, I think he's always shot interior scenes in that manner to some extent. I think that's just how he does, inside shots. Yeah, I don't know. It feels like two kind of different productions kind of pushed together. I came away with something new this time, which I can't believe after watching this film for 4 decades. I've always been very empathetic to Hidatora, because he is almost pitiful at it. But I realized, I've always recognized the performance, but Kaede's really kind of the protagonist of this film. She's the one who succeeds at everything she's trying to do, and rightfully so, given what was done to her family. So I never was empathetic to her before. The only place where she's not empathetic at all is when she insists that Jiro have Sue killed. And, you even got Kuragani is like, yeah, I ain't doing that shit. And Kurigani's a very interesting character because he's not somebody who strikes you as having a weak stomach for that kind of thing. You know, he does whatever needs to be done, but there's something that he finds so abominable about, you know, killing Sue that he not only doesn't do it and does that wonderful, hilarious gag with Kaede and Jiro in the drawing room there. But also warns Sue and her mother and her brother to get the fuck out of town. Sorry, that was probably my phone.
Yeah, it was very loud, but that's okay.
I apologize.
We'll forgive you. It's actually one of, I think, the main differences between King Lear and Ron is that Hidetori is kind of an asshole. Like, he was an asshole to all of these characters. And King Lear is, like, prideful, but, like, he kind of feels like the victim of a bunch of other people's plotting. This one feels more like revenge. Like, he's not... I feel bad for him going insane, but also he was kind of a horrible dude before all of this happened. So it's really weird to, like, want to sympathize with him versus, like, Kaede, who is also kind of a terrible person, but is out on a revenge plot. Like, they kind of have similar lines here.
What was I going to? Oh, I was going to. There was a conversation that we had, I think last week or it's something over the last couple of weeks, where we were discussing Tywin Lannister, and that's how I think of Hidetora, and that's how I think of all the brothers. I mean, it's really a bunch of Tywin Lannisters, you know, doing what they believe is right for the family, although more so Hidetora than anybody else. You know, everything that Hidetora did, he did to, you know, take care of the family was the whole point. That's how they did it back then. So I don't know, you know, and Taro kind of the same way. Jiro, I think, is just an ass, you know, and there's an element of Macbeth to the relationship between Kaede and Jiro, and even Taro. She manipulates Taro like nothing, but Jiro's even stupider. So, you know, she walks him off the bloody plank.
Yeah, she reminds me of Lady Macbeth a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know King Lear that well. I actually tried to read it after I watched Ron. I keep saying Ran, but Ron the first time because I just hadn't read King Lear, but I couldn't get into it. But I think Kaeda's part is increased from her equivalent in the play, or I'm not even sure if she has an equivalent.
She does.
In the play.
But
Edmund.
It is greatly exaggerated. I mean, this is very loosely based on King Lear. Like I say loosely based, like it's not pretty much the exact same plot of the tragedy aspect of it.
Kaede's much more vicious.
Yeah.
And
she's got a plan.
Yeah, and I'll also say, I was just also going to say that I definitely felt that she was like Lady Macbeth in this one as well, but the Throne of Blood, Lady Macbeth is still the queen, I guess, because the Throne of Blood's version of Lady Macbeth is extraordinary, and Kaede is very good as well, very compelling. But I just wanted to plug Throne of Blood again.
I'm adding it to my list.
Throne of Blood is done much more closely to its source material than this film is.
So we've talked a lot about like things around it, but I did want to talk about like Kurosawa's intentions with this movie. Like, what was the lesson that you guys got from it? Anybody? Or else I'm going to start calling names.
Don't hand your fiefdom over to your sons.
If you still intend to be the ruler of the family, don't.
Until you die, yes.
you know, I was while I was thinking about that while I was watching it this time, and my first thought was this is just all karmic, but I don't know enough about the um, the collaterally damaged characters like Sue and her brother and her family, and everybody dies in this. You know, there are no survivors, so there's something very nihilistic about the whole thing. So that really struck me, and that was also why I realized that Kaede is the winner in the whole film, in the whole story, because she gets everything. She gets to go to her grave a happy woman because she accomplished everything she was trying to do. But even the good people, like Lady Sue and her mother and her poor brother, stuck blind on that very narrow walkway, and even loses the Amida Buddha scroll that his sister gave him. And that's such that last shot is so sad and depressing to think about.
It's also, and I feel really bad saying this, but that was another one where I was like, this is unintentionally humorous to me, of just everybody's dying and then it's just a blind guy left in the ruins of a castle, like kind of just sitting there like, where's everybody?
It's a great cosmic joke.
Yeah, it definitely completes the tragedy cycle of it, but I was like, this is very sadly humorous. Would you be surprised to know that according to Kurosawa, a lot of this movie is a metaphor for nuclear war and the anxiety that is post Hiroshima?
Not surprised at all.
Yeah, according to his interviews, that was his main storyline that he was going with the whole, like, everybody has, like, the arquebuses. So everybody's kind of, you have, like, half of these people that are still shooting arrows the old way. Hidetore's shooting arrows out, and then everybody else just has guns. So it was all just, like, no matter how you move forward in history, we're just going to keep finding new ways to kill each other.
Well, and it's all mutually assured destruction, right? Like there are no winners.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
It makes a lot of sense as soon as I say it, but it's not something that came to my mind immediately. So when I read that in like the interview, I was like, yeah, that makes sense, but I didn't get it. I'm sorry. It was not my initial thing.
I'm looking at Michael Wilmington's essay that he wrote for the Criterion edition, and he writes, it's a tragedy fed by Shakespeare, No, and the samurai epic, full of metaphors and grand themes. A film that shows human brutality, warfare, and suffering as if from the eye of a dispassionate God seated far above the world's terror. In King Lear, we hear that spine-chilling speech, as flies to want boys, so we are to the gods. They kill us for their sport. But in Ron, it is the humans who kill, wantonly and bloodily, before a God who never interferes, freezingly sad and silent.
Yeah. Man, I need to work on my reviews and like analysis statements when I'm doing these calls. Like, I'm getting a lot better at doing my research on them, but.
Well, I mean, this is not a run-of-the-mill film that you're just going to be able to, knock off a quick, quick discussion.
Yeah. Did you want to talk about the score?
Oh, well, Takamitsu Toro is probably one of my biggest influences musically, and that score is stunning.
It's one of the reasons why this movie got moved up my list of movies for us to watch, is because back in January we listened to Gustav Mahler, and this soundtrack is heavily influenced by Gustav Mahler. I think even in that conversation that we had, we actually brought up Ron.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have to turn on a light.
I think the Mahler influence really only shows in the track Hell's Picture Scroll, which is the score that plays over the battle scenes. But the rest of it is very. Takamitsu is interesting because when he started as a composer, he rejected his Japaneseness. He didn't want to be a Japanese composer, and so he went and studied Western composition. And most of his early works are definitely within that time frame. Mostly the late era, the early moderns, Webern and Mahler and those kinds of guys. And it was later that he came back to Japanese music, and then all of a sudden erupted with all these fabulous compositions that are some of them are just straight kind of Japanese sounding things, and some of them combine Western orchestration ideas with Japanese ideas. I mean, and he wrote a lot of music for classical guitar as well. And died relatively young.
I don't know a lot about him, but between you and Miguel, I want to learn more.
I have a playlist of, I think, everything he ever wrote, and I just put that on at night and go to sleep to it. It's just.
You want to share with the class?
Oh, I can read right off the playlist.
No, I just mean send it to me. I'm the class.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. It's on Amazon, but I can convert it over to a Spotify playlist as well if you want.
I can also listen to Amazon. I just use Spotify whenever I do these because it makes me a nice little image that gets populated at the bottom.
Okay. No, I would be happy to share. I'm a big advocate for Takamitsu. I wish that his works would get played more often in the States. But there are a lot of recordings.
That's good. Like I said, I don't know a lot about him, but you guys have made me want to learn more. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add?
We've still got 15 minutes to go.
I've exhausted my list of information. So, and like I said before we got on, I am unfortunately not feeling super great tonight. So,
Aw. Well, I hope you feel better soon.
Me too.
I do have a question.
Mhm.
Does it say anywhere like the length of production? How long were they in production for?
So they were in pre-production, like I said, since like the mid 1970s. He only got clearance to run it in 1983, which I believe is when they sorry, I'm also trying to look it up as I'm talking, and it was a bad idea.
He wrote the script in 75.
Yeah. It doesn't say. I do know that the filming started in 1983 and it was released in 1985. Long movie. He also edited it, which I imagine took, although like Derek said, apparently he was very fast with it. So probably 6 months to a year.
I would bet a year.
Yeah.
I would bet on a year.
Probably with like time in between each of like the different scenes, because I mean, you have field scene and then castle 1, castle 2, castle 3, film like field again. And I imagine that it was like, especially considering they were using actual castles that existed and had like a lot of permits that went into it and a lot of care that had to have been used. I mean, they had so many like things happening in the outside of these castles. Like I imagine it was a lot of taking care of their surroundings in that way. So I don't have information on how long it took for them to shoot it, but I do know that there, between when filming started and the release, there were about 2 years. So probably about a year.
Well, it was really a year and a half because they released in May of '85 in Japan.
It's true.
So if he started in '83, if he started in January of '83,
So according to the AI overview that Google came up with when I Googled this, it took 9 months. So this is a full-fledged baby.
I would imagine that the interiors were maybe 20-25% of that time, because those battle scenes must have to coordinate those things. God, that must have been a slog.
So
Yeah.
I
I think
finally
oh,
you go.
I was just gonna say, I think I read about how they coordinated the battle scenes, and I think there were people with whistles hidden amongst the soldiers or whatever, and they would give whistles when it was time for certain groups of soldiers to move or whatever. And I also read a very interesting YouTube comment. So I have no idea if this is verifiable or anything, but this commenter on YouTube said that he was one of the extras and he was chosen because he was an archery student at a university. And so Kurosawa and his company were recruiting archers to shoot real arrows during some of the scenes. Of course, in Throne of Blood, they famously shot real arrows at the star, or at least in front of his face. Yeah, and, at Toshiro Mifune in the final scene. So the fear in his eyes is real when you see him almost dodge the arrow, or he dodges the arrows, but it's because those arrows were real. Apparently, according to this YouTube comment, and again, I don't know how accurate it could be, but some of the arrows in Ron were also real because they were using archery students to shoot them.
I thought about that. We started this call with my favorite scene of Hidetora just sitting in front of arrows flying, and I was like, man, shooting that must have just been a bunch of people being like, don't hit him. Because at times they get pretty close to him, but it's still like a straight path, and it's probably one of the closer scenes that they have in this movie. So, but I did think about that. That is
still,
pretty
don't
funny.
move.
Well, he does get very still in that scene. I thought it was a double, like a mannequin of him.
I imagine that all of the face makeup he has on does not help to quell that decision, like that thought process.
Yeah.
There are times of that where he looks more like a doll than a person.
Yeah, I don't know much about No theater. I think the only No I've really been exposed to is in an Ozu movie. I think in late spring, the characters go to a No performance or something like that. But anyway, yeah, I don't know much about No theater, but I know that his makeup was heavily inspired by it, and also the Throne of Blood makeup is also inspired by it. But I also wanted to mention the star of this movie is unrecognizable under the makeup, but he is he was a very interesting. Actually, I think he's still alive, but he is a very interesting actor who had a bit part on Seven Samurai. He literally just walks across the street in one of the scenes. He doesn't have any lines in that movie, but then he was the villain in Yojimbo, and he also was the main character in one of my favorite Japanese movies, Harakiri, which is not a Kurosawa movie, but it's a very, very good. I sort of call it an anti-samurai movie. It's from the '60s, but he's very good in that. And I also started rewatching High and Low, another Kurosawa movie, and he's a detective in that. So he has had a very, very varied career. Like he has just played every type of part. But I did not recognize him at all under the makeup.
like I said, I really like High and Low, and I've also seen Howdy Kitty and really like it a lot. And I also did not make that connection at all. So, all
I mean,
right.
he looks so completely alien in this. You know, I don't imagine anybody recognized him. You know, the makeup on him. I mean, he looks. You know, and that was 40 years ago. So you know, he looks older in that than he looks now.
Yeah.
You know, and he's like, I think he's like 84.
He's currently 92.
Oh wow.
So,
I think my final thought is I recently watched Shogun, and it was hard not to compare, even though, you know, they're two very different, obviously, but also a very good show if you haven't seen it.
And much better than the miniseries that I grew up with in the 70s.
I didn't know there was one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the new Shogun. I haven't seen the original, but I know it starred Toshiro Mifune, who is on screen here for some reason. And
yeah.
I'm not sure how he's connected to Ron, but
Sometimes with these, it just like pulls the names from places. I do not know why I do not make this list, but yeah, occasionally we get them on here, and I just don't understand why. Maybe he was a background extra in it. Who knows?
Has everybody here seen the Shogun series?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so that ending, I don't know where
Well-
they got that ending. That ending is completely different from the book. That's not what Toranaga does.
Okay. Well, we won't delve into.
Oh, because we don't know who.
Shogun's
Yeah,
stuff.
because we don't know who's going to be watching this. Yeah. Sometime when we get
Well, now
together,
I'm
I'll-
curious. Maybe we should pick it for one of our next book clubs.
It is over 1,000 pages long.
Maybe not.
But it's never slow. God, I love that book. I probably read that book maybe 10 times since the 70s. Most recently last year.
We'll read
There's
it
some-
over a period of a year.
I
All
read it
right.
in a month last time. I read it in a month. It just sucks you in. It's a page turner. You do not want to stop. It's so
Tim,
good.
I do not have time for that.
Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that.
All right, so we are coming up on an hour here. Does anybody have any final thoughts on Ron?
Even if you didn't care for it, if you get an opportunity to see it on the big screen, do it because it's a completely different film. It shows up at the New Art every now and then, and I think American Cinematheque has screened it on occasion as well.
It's also been remastered, so
Yeah, the 2014 restoration, I saw that at the New Art, and it was interesting because they didn't restore the opening credits. So the credits were very scratchy, and then all of a sudden because it's the scene just before the boar chase, and so all those scenes where the credits, it's all scratchy and marked up, and then after the credits, it gets stunningly beautiful.
all right. On that note, a call to action to go see it in movie theaters. I think I am going to end the stream for the night. So thank you guys for joining me, and I hope to catch you on the next one.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.